Hi there. Thank you very much for joining me on the Ask Me Anything. I am just going to go through some of the questions that I know some of you have asked. If you have any additional questions, just feel free to send them through, and I will answer them. If I just start by introducing myself. My name's Abeed. I have a 20-year background in advertising. Initially started in the city trading oil. So I come from from a trading background, followed by a career in advertising, which has been predominantly on the publisher side and the media owner side. So I've been selling to agencies and brands over the course of my career. Some of the roles I've had, I've been at ESPN. I launched ESPN Digital Media in Europe. I was the first employee at Radium One, which was a San Francisco programmatic business, based programmatic business. I was the first employee in Europe in 2010. I launched and built that business. So I've spent a lot of time in the programmatic space, and I've been involved with Papyrus now since March as the CEO. So that hopefully gives you a bit of color as to my background. So in terms of the questions, so if I take the first question, which was Papyrus has been around a long time. What's the essential idea of the project now, and what are the main goals? So the main goal of the project is very, very simple. We have a very ambitious vision, but we feel that as a management team and as a business, we feel that that's essentially where the opportunity lies. So our vision is to be the protocol for the advertising industry, which is ambitious, as I said, but effectively there are a number of different advertising blockchain solutions out there, but they're essentially only dealing with one part of the problem, whether that's a payment problem or they're trying to consolidate the order form. What we're effectively looking at doing is essentially bringing the industry together. So if you take how the financial markets industry started, when it moved from floor-based trading to screen-based trading, or which is essentially what happened with the world of programmatic in digital advertising in 2010. What it did is it brought data, it brought sophistication, but in the financial markets, they maintained a regulatory framework. In digital advertising, we didn't maintain any regulatory framework. So the barriers to entry for players was very, very simple. And as a result of that, we've essentially created a framework where there is a self-regulatory framework where people are essentially saying that they've done certain things. There's no real transparency in the ecosystem. So what we're trying to do by being the protocol for the industry is to connect all the different players to our platform and essentially enable that full transparency across the ecosystem and supply chain. So as I said, it's an ambitious vision, but what we're trying to do is basically be that protocol for the industry. The steps we have to take to get there are essentially connecting the different players in the ecosystem, from the DSPs, the SSPs, the publishers, the data providers, the verification vendors, connecting those different players, and essentially then enabling brands and agencies to start to run campaigns using their existing technology, but having more visibility and more transparency through using our software. So we're not trying to disintermediate anybody, but they will essentially disintermediate themselves if they don't play the game fairly. So that, and in terms of the baby steps that we're looking to try and take, we're starting at the moment by looking to try and run pilot tests with a number of the major agency holding groups, and some of the publishers right now. And those are basically aimed at trying to help them understand how blockchain works and help them understand how the Papyrus platform works, but really trying to give them some confidence around the fact that what we've built is suitable and fit for purpose for the industry. They've heard there's a lot of talk in the industry about blockchain, but no one really necessarily fully understands it. So part of our process is an education process and then an iterative process with tests to try and extending those tests to try and prove the effectiveness of the platform. So that's question number one. Hopefully I've answered that. Question number two was, how has the idea of Papyrus, has it come about, and why was it not something like cloud storage? So very, very simply, Papyrus is essentially an industrial blockchain. It has essentially been built to deal with businesses that operate in supply chains. The advertising supply chain is probably the most complicated and the most fragmented of any supply chain that exists today. So it's the most difficult to go after, but it's also, once you've solved the advertising challenge, all the other supply chains are very, very simple off the back of that. The advertising piece, because of the way it's grown up, because of the way that the speed at which it's grown, and the amount of money and the size of the opportunity. So if you give, just to give you a sense of the size of the opportunity, there are $229 billion of advertising is programmatically traded today. It's in the digital advertising arena, which is huge. There is no other supply chain, there is no other marketplace that is close to that. So what we're trying to do is essentially solve that problem. It may sound complicated because of the way that people, like in any industry, they try and make it sound complicated to keep people out and keep the barriers high. But fundamentally, advertising is is a very, very simple supply chain. All that's happened in the middle is you have a little bit, you've got more players in the middle of the supply chain than you would do in other businesses between the buyer and the seller, because of the nature of the relationship between that buyer and seller. So if you think about how it's evolved over the last 20 years, historically, I would have bought an advert on a website. I'd have received a screenshot. In 2010, that whole world changed, and suddenly I was now buying an audience. And what didn't happen is any kind of verification around, is that audience that I'm buying, is it actually the audience I'm looking to try and get? And that's where the birth of these verification vendors, these brand safety challenges that started to appear, transparency issues, that's where all of those things started to appear. So that's the real nub of the problem that we're trying to solve, is provide that clarity and transparency in that part of the supply chain, and then really bring the efficiency and the operational efficiency really at the settlement and reconciliation end of the supply chain. But if you just think about digital advertising like any other supply chain, but just with a little bit more fragmentation in the middle, that's the challenge that we're trying to solve. So that hopefully again answers that question. Just on the concept of why a token. Well, and a lot of people have asked this question, when we have meetings. But the reality is, the token essentially secures the ecosystem. It enables participation in the ecosystem and rewards the participants. But it's also effectively acts like a digital asset and enables information to be transferred from one place to the other. And that's fundamentally, if you think about it in its most basic terms, that is essentially what the supply chain needs. Okay, question number 3. I know the Papyrus team from last year joined your whitelist. Okay, so what is our strategy for the token sale? So I'm sure a lot of you have followed the ICO market and have noticed that there's a lot of scam projects. That's probably the best way of putting it. And over the course of the last year, there's a number of businesses who've raised a lot of money on basically a piece of paper. And as a result of that, you've got investors that are now starting to question the ICO market. You've got some investors that are, a lot of traditional investors that are sort of running shy of the market right now because there are a lot of scams. What we're doing, and unfortunately, we are a very legitimate project. We have some very interesting partners that we are talking to. We've had some very good compliments from some of the biggest brands in the world. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is, there's an element of, we have to now play within the rules of the market. So we are in the process of, I'm going to answer another question here around the jurisdiction question in a minute, but effectively, what we're effectively doing here is we are transferring our jurisdiction or our headquarters from Singapore to Switzerland. Why Switzerland? Because Switzerland has all the connotations of safety. We're dealing with an industry that's very cynical, and and we're talking about bringing transparency to that industry. Switzerland has a lot of benefits going from a tax standpoint, from a safety standpoint. It's essentially right in the middle of Europe. It's almost not going to be affected by Brexit or any of those political issues. A number of the major advertisers in the world are, so from the likes of P&G and Unilever, and a number of others, Hewlett Packard, have their European media headquarters either in Geneva or in Zurich. There are a number of watch companies, etc., etc. So there's a lot of Switzerland has a lot of benefits going for it, and we looked at Malta, we looked at Gibraltar. Gibraltar, while it's very favourable for crypto businesses, is not necessarily from an advertising standpoint the right ecosystem, because of that's where historically a lot of the gambling providers have basically headquartered themselves. Malta is up and coming, and some of the Caymans and some of those don't really have the safety aspect that we're looking for with Switzerland. So Switzerland is where we're moving everything. That process has started, and we expect it will take about 2 weeks, between 2 and 4 weeks. And that will essentially enable us to provide that first level of legitimacy that some of the investors are asking. That's the first thing. The second thing is it will also provide advertisers with the comfort that we have a European headquarters, and in a lot of cases, some of the biggest brands we want to talk to, like Nestle and P&G, we're very close to them. So that really kind of helps. So our plan on the token sale, and we're at the moment we are in the process of opening a private sale, effectively, and that is the numbers haven't changed, but we're also in the process of looking at and we've got negotiations in place with a advertising blockchain initiative out of the US, which essentially works with the advertising associations, and that is essentially giving us the opportunity to basically scale and grow with. Okay, so that kind of covers that piece around all of that. So the strategy around token sales. So private sale is the first piece. We are exploring potential of an equity as part of this partnership with this company in the US, which I'll explain a little bit more of in a minute. We are very focused on going to an ICO, but probably towards the end of the year, end of the year or early next year. Igor and myself sort of talk about it a lot, but we think that the early next year or towards the end of this year, the markets will have stabilized. A lot of the scams that currently exist will have effectively, hopefully, been found out. So that's the plan. It's unfortunate that the market is the way it is right now, but I think what we're looking to try and do is play to our strengths, develop the traction, develop the use cases to make us a no-brainer from an investment standpoint. Okay, there are several projects trying to deal with different issues of digital advertising. So yeah, this is a great question. There are lots of projects in the space that are trying to deal with digital advertising. A lot of them are either what I would call a disintermediation play, which essentially means they're trying to cut someone out of the supply chain. And what we're trying to do, and that I think is partly is quite dangerous. Others are essentially one element. They're dealing with, as I said before, one element of the supply chain. So they'll be dealing with payments or reconciliation, or they'll be dealing with data or customer data. What we're effectively doing is, as I said, we built an industrial blockchain. We will be able to enable businesses to build on top of our platform, which is the first thing. So think of that a little bit like how Facebook, the Facebook ecosystem evolved, where you effectively they created a developer network who built businesses on top of their platform. That is it's not necessarily the perfect analogy, but it's a similar example of what we've built and where our sort of vision lies. The second piece is what we're trying to do, and what makes us outstanding and different to all the others is we're essentially trying to connect and collaborate with the industry. We're essentially trying to we've created our channel layer, which essentially connects the ad marketplace participants to it. and that essentially will enable advertisers and brands to run with their existing technology stacks and technology partners and publishers. And what we'll do is we will be able to surface more information than they've ever been able to see around the transparency piece, the brand safety piece, and the verification and the price verification piece. In the middle, we will consolidate the order form effectively into a smart contract, and then that smart contract will essentially simplify and automate the reconciliation and settlement piece, which is very human and very arduous at the back end. So what makes us different is we're a collaboration play. We have, just to elaborate a little bit more on this partnership with the Advertising Blockchain Initiative that we are in the process of negotiating, what that essentially will provide us is independence from a governance standpoint. It'll also provide the trade associations that we're talking about are the 4As, the ANA, the DMA, and we have meetings in Washington next week to negotiate and talk to them about effectively creating a framework where they validate and they provide the governance, very much like a financial markets ecosystem, where they provide the governance around the ecosystem. And what that does is it basically means that Papyrus will be built for the ad industry and endorsed and rubber stamped by the ad industry. And that essentially is that's a unique point of difference that no one else is going to have. So that's one of the really exciting things that we've been working on over the last couple of months. It's sort of, well, actually probably the last 6 months. It's took about 4 months to gather speed, and now it's gathering speed, and it's really going. But it's going at a great speed now. So that's interesting, and that's something that will give investors the comfort that we are the protocol for the industry. Hopefully, it'll also give advertisers the comfort that their trade associations have endorsed us, and that's that's a real benefit to us. So, question number 5: Papyrus is a blockchain solution. Can you explain why our project needs blockchain? Okay, so blockchains. This is interesting. So everyone obviously bandies around blockchain and says that blockchain is the silver bullet that's going to change everything. In my opinion, blockchain is the future of business. Is blockchain the perfect answer to everything? No, it's not. I think if you look at how blockchain today exists, so as an example, lots of advertising technology businesses are talking about having blockchain capability or exploring blockchain capability. What they don't necessarily understand is, from an advertising standpoint, to be able to implement blockchain today, I think the fastest blockchain from my research anyway operates at around 2,500 transactions a second. In the world of programmatic advertising, we're going to need transaction speeds of well over 2 million transactions a second, if not higher. So that's a real challenge around the speed piece. There's a real challenge around the data privacy piece with GDPR and everything else. So where we're different and why what we've built solves those problems is this channel layer, which essentially does all the heavy lifting and simplifies a lot of that challenge and pushes the information into block parts into the blockchain. So that's a differentiator that we've got that no one else has really established, which is why we feel we're able to become the protocol for the industry, and we can deal with that big vision, whereas a lot of the others are essentially using the existing systems out there or just built on the existing systems, which only allows them to basically deal with one part of the ecosystem. So that's a key thing. Our project needs blockchain for the simple reason that if you take the financial market story that I told you earlier on, where when they moved from floor-based trading to screen-based trading, they basically maintained a governance framework, and you had to go through tests and KYC and various other things to become to trade in the marketplace. In the world of online advertising, we didn't do that. So the market spawned and created hundreds of different businesses. I think at last count, there are something like 97 bidding platforms or DSPs out there, which is crazy. When the majority, 85% of the revenue goes through about 4 or 5 of them, and bidding is a commoditized service anyway. So if you take that as a framework, it's very difficult now. The market has thousands of players in it to try and put all of those players back in a box and try and create a financial markets type regulation system. What blockchain will essentially do is it will provide the transparency that hasn't existed before. And what it will allow brands to do is identify who are the good actors and bad actors. And those people will essentially disintermediate themselves by not playing by the rules of the marketplace. So blockchain is required for this project because we can't go backwards and back in time and try and put everything back in a box. Blockchain is the future of business, and this is the only way to essentially bring that transparency back to the ecosystem. Hopefully I've answered that question. And yeah, so that's the key thing. It's also, also fundamentally the decentralization that blockchain provides is really the only way to kind of to go through and solve that problem. What does it mean for the MVP? So creating an MVP, why is that important? So I'm just going to have a quick sip of my coffee here. So MVP. So I've worked in advertising, as I said, for about 20 years. There are lots of ad tech businesses, and that have a great story. And the tech, they'll sell ahead of time, and they'll go out there and basically tell their tech story, and hope that the tech catches up at some point. And it'll all work out well. Now that used to be the norm, and it's still there are still businesses that do that. Where we're different, and where I think this is a credit to Igor and the team as well. Where we're different is we've actually built an MVP. So we obviously raised our pre-ICO. We went out there and we actually built a management team. We built our MVP. Which provides a huge amount of credibility, both to you as investors, but also to future investors and to the ad marketplace. We've actually gone and built an MVP, and that gives us a leap on a lot of the others. A lot of the others have raised some money or are looking to raise some money on the back of a white paper, and that's essentially where they're at right now. We have something that we can run tests on, pilots on. We can run proof of concepts on, and we can educate the market as to how this solution works. So the MVP is it also allows us to test and identify what platforms and what tweaks we have to make to basically have a fully scalable product, which we're looking to launch towards the end of the year. And it also allows us to identify what other commercial products are required in the marketplace that we can build on top of our solution. So having an MVP is a huge benefit to us. It also gives us it gives us that credibility, and it allows us to identify and prove the best way of scaling the technology and moving this forward. So I would say that you guys are in a good place. We're in a good place as a business, and you're in a good place as investors, because we're ahead of the market in terms of what we've developed thus far. Okay, so testing and integrations with some companies is the next question. So what's our policy? So what we're trying to do at the moment, and as I said, if you think about the advertising industry, blockchain is everyone's talking about it. Not everyone really understands it as much as they should do, but there are agencies and there are brands that have blockchain working groups who've got significant levels of understanding around this, and they're testing they're looking at different solutions. So we've had a number of conversations with some very big brands directly. We've had a number of conversations with some agencies. In fact, we have one later on this morning with one of the big holding groups, and that will essentially. And what we're trying to do there is scope out and identify what a pilot would look like. So in the initial phase, I'm expecting that it'll be more likely to be a closed loop test. So it might be a scenario where they have a couple of partners where they're not sure which one is a good actor and which one is a bad actor, and they're looking for us to help them prove or disprove a theory or a hypothesis. And that's a very simple example, but it allows them to test the water in using blockchain technology and identify where the opportunity, identify or get information that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to get information about. So our policy is essentially working with the agencies and working with the brands directly to start to run pilots and tests initially, I expect on a closed loop basis, with a view to then moving to an open RTB basis and layering on more complicated, I guess, more complex issues into the tests as they develop. We're learning the marketplace in terms of how it all sticks together, and the agencies are very much they're really in that kind of learning space. So we're working with them, we're educating them as the experts in the space. We're educating them on the best way of leveraging our technology, but also leveraging blockchain technology as a whole. We are also in conversations around integrations with a number of the different partners in the supply chain. So we've identified about 30 to 40 players in the ecosystem, which probably make up around, I would say, about 40%. We've identified 40 players who make up around 70%, 75% of the total spend that goes through the system. So there will be, most advertisers, most agencies will use 2 out of 3 verification vendors, for example. They will use out of the 6 or 7 DSPs that we've identified, the demand side platforms or bidding software. Effectively, we've identified 4 that have predominantly the majority of spend that go through it. So what we want to try and do is simplify the onboarding for brands. So if a brand wants to run with the trade desk, for example, as their DSP, we can say we're integrated with them, right? So we know that we've identified, as I said, the 40 or so. We're going directly after those 40. We're also working directly with the agencies and the brands to run those specific tests. So we're approaching the market from both sides, both from a kind of pure business development standpoint, but then also from on a specific pilot use case basis with agencies and brands. So hopefully that answers the question on that. But we really are looking to try and demonstrate and improve the scalability of our technology. We are, in terms of partners that we have already signed up. One is called Crimtan. The other one's called Smarty Ads, and we have about 4 or 5 others in the pipeline. Crimtan is a UK-based company with tech in Russia and Belarus. They also operate they're very active in the Middle East. They run a lot of campaigns in the Middle East, so we're in the process of working with them on a couple of tests as well. So all of that is all positive, and it's all driving the business in the right direction. Question number 8, change jurisdiction. Hopefully I've answered that. As I said, Switzerland is where we're moving to, and hopefully that question's been answered. Okay, so question number 9. Okay, so how do you think the digital advertising market is, and should it grow up a little bit more before it's ready for change? So, interesting question. If you think, as I said, I've been involved in this marketplace over 20 years. The markets, if you think about the shifts that the market's been through, so advertising as a whole, in the early 2000s, it went through a process of digitization. So it went from, I'm buying a print ad, a TV ad, an outdoor ad, and I can see it, I can touch it, and I can feel it, to I'm now buying an ad on a website, and that website I'm buying a specific website. I'm going to get a screenshot of that. Brilliant. I'm running it across a digital platform. So that was the early 2000s. That was the era of digitization. In around 2009-10, the marketplace went through effectively automation. So no longer was I buying a specific website. I was now using data and using exchanges, or buying advertising through exchanges, and using effectively high frequency bidding software to essentially bid in real time for users across hundreds or thousands of websites. So the amount of supply increased significantly on the publisher side, on the content side, and then also the amount of fragmentation and the amount of lack of transparency started to appear, because you were essentially buying an audience across multiple sites. You weren't able to suddenly touch it or feel it or see it necessarily, because obviously that would be a wasted impression. So that happened over about eight or 9 years ago, and the market in my view, every 7 to 8 years, it goes through a phase, and it goes through a paradigm shift. And we're at this point now where, and you've probably a lot of you have seen some of our materials which have a quote from Mark Pritchard, who's a CMO of P&G, who talks about the murky supply chain. And effectively, and I think a lot of the CMOs, and having been at the advertising festival 2 weeks ago, that was a lot of the conversation was around the lack of transparency and the changing relationship between the advertiser, between the buyer and the seller, effectively in the supply chain. So the industry is at that point of inflection, and it needs to go through its next shift. And its next shift, and GDPR is a sort of mini GDPR and e-privacy are a kind of a mini shifts towards moving the business towards more of an environment of transparency, of security for the brand and the consumer, and then also ultimately trust. So we're at that point where the industry is going to go through this shift. We feel that we're well positioned, and some of the strategies that we put in place with the advertising blockchain initiative and some of the and our technological capability, we feel that we're well positioned to essentially provide to be the technology effectively to take the industry through that next shift in its status. So really focused for us over the next year in being the company that basically drives that shift and change. Okay. Question: How is the question 10? How is the business development process going in general? Do people seem interested in the project? Yes, absolutely. It's gone really well. We've had probably about 40 or 50 meetings in the last month or so, meetings and calls. I haven't yet had a meeting with anybody that says, no, I don't want to learn more, or I don't want to do more, which is really positive. Now, obviously, it's blockchain. It's the thing of the moment that everyone's talking about. But there are, as I said, there are lots of solutions out there, and I know, having spoken to a few of the others, that they haven't had the same number of positive meetings. So it's really positive that we've had a number of people that are very interested, taking our meetings. As an example, I had a meeting yesterday with a contact at one of the big marketing clouds. We now have a meeting in New York next week with the head of business development. So things are moving fast. Business development is going well. We are, as I said, we're focused very much on trying to get a couple of tests away, or more than a couple of tests, but try and get some tests away, which we can PR, both to investors, but also to the marketplace, to really help them understand that this is coming. And we're well positioned to deal with it. So fundamentally, it's going very well, and I'm pleased. As CEO, I'm pleased. We're looking to build out our business development function over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. So yeah, it's all good on that front. What is the vision for the project in the nearest future, and what are the key points your project is working on right now? So the vision, as I said, is to be the protocol for the ad industry. What are the projects we're working on right now? We're working on pilot tests and scoping out those pilot tests and making sure we've got that right, making sure that we are developing and building our MVP towards more of an optimal viable product, which we're going to launch in Q4. And that will effectively be our fully scalable version of our product. We are in the process of building out commercial products that sit on top of our solution, from dashboards, price verification dashboards, to brand safety dashboards. We're also in the process of building out a ranking system where publishers will effectively be able to demonstrate their value. So there's a number of different commercial products that the dev team are looking to build out based on the meetings and the conversations we've had thus far. We're very focused on trying to get this industry consortium negotiation done and announced, so we can effectively be well positioned to try and drive that forward. And then business development, and we're running the business development piece and focused on that. And then on the governance side, we've obviously hired a CFO in Svetlana. which is great. And we are in the process of just putting the governance framework in place around around Switzerland and sort of our jurisdiction, and then making sure we've got the sort of financial governance around, our profit and loss management, cash flow forecasts, and a lot of the sort of nuts and bolts of the business is basically where we're focused on the governance side. So that's that. So question number 12, according to our blog, so we released the MVP in March, just around the time of the crypto conferences in Puerto Rico. We are, as I said, we've run a couple of internal tests, and we're in the process of running and scoping out tests with partners. So we'll have a view in the next month or two, exactly what what advertisers and brands are looking for from the blockchain as an initial point of contact, from their initial tests. There's lots of things that we can do with our platform, but not necessarily all of them, all at the same time are required right now. So what we're trying to do, as I said, is start with closed loop tests, and we're effectively focused on trying to get those tests up and running, and then building on those tests and trying to extend them into different and look at different dimensions of the technology to basically help that. Facebook has lifted the ban on ads-related cryptocurrencies, still banned ICO ads. Will Papyrus consider promoting themselves as a technology rather than ICO? Well, this is an interesting conversation. This is a very interesting point. This is partly why the way that our raise is going to be structured is likely a private sale, and looking at potentially an equity element of that as well, which again provides that full legitimacy that people will look for. It also changes the profile of the business, because it essentially will enable us to be more of a technology platform rather than just a straight ICO, because we'll have a lot more credibility and legitimacy in the marketplace. So I'm happy to have that conversation directly with I think it's Jawad who's put that conversation through. So it's very much, we're a technology enabler. Certain people have talked about us as pipes for the ecosystem, and that's oversimplifying it. But fundamentally, we are building out the technology that the ecosystem will effectively operate on top of. Okay, Papyrus is finding it very hard to sell tokens. So effectively, so question number 14 is why has Papyrus not sold its tokens, and why isn't it still listed on exchanges? So we basically held tokens on a non-transferable basis to avoid a creation of secondary markets, and to make it easier to establish a fair token valuation during our ongoing private sale. As we're effectively focused on delivering technology, as per the previous question, and the product before running it into the main ICO round, it's taking us a little bit more time. But part of that is due to the market factors. We can't control the market. What we don't want to do, and there's a number of businesses that have gone to ICO recently and have sort of come unstuck a little bit and recognized that the market hasn't performed the way they would like it to perform. So we will be going to ICO, we'll be listing on exchanges, but we're likely starting to look at that towards Q4, and either towards the end of Q4 or the early part of Q1 next year. Because one of the things that we need to do, and I'm conscious of this, is that we need to try and build traction. This marketplace, as I said, as some of the other questions previously, there are a lot of players in the space. We need to create the differentiation. We need to build the traction. We need to build the partnerships, and we need to demonstrate to the ad industry specifically that we have the right frameworks in place to be that protocol. At that point, the ICO and the full raise, that will almost become a no-brainer at that point. Right now, we want to wait for the markets to settle a little bit. remove some of the scam projects, and then effectively, go to the market when we feel the markets are ready, and when we feel that we've got the right basis for success. I don't want to go to an ICO and effectively not have the performance that I'd like to expect. Okay, so project from the beginning. You never change a roadmap. So yeah, this is, I think it's more of a statement here. Yeah, our focus has never really changed. We've been pretty. Our vision may have got greater towards more of the sort of the overall protocol for the industry, and the way that we're going about that. That may have changed slightly in terms of building the distributed governance play with the associations and the blockchain initiative. But fundamentally, we've been laser focused on delivering our product and our technology. We've been laser focused on being a technology business, and that's a key part of what we're trying to do. So, we will effectively be updating everyone fairly soon, but we're really focused on the technology side of things, and we've got very focused go-to-market plans in terms of integrations, in terms of tests. With partners, with agencies, with brands. So we're pretty. I'm very happy with the strategy, and I'm very happy with with where we're at right now. I think we're ahead of where we'd like to be, or where I was expecting us to be. And it's really, it's really all in front of us now. And I think the last 2 weeks, at the advertising festival, the coverage that we received, the reception we received from a lot of the brands and a lot of the advertisers was really positive. I was on 4 panels talking about Papyrus and talking about blockchain, and the reception was very, very good. So I think I'm very happy with where we're at right now at this stage. What can we expect from Papyrus in July and August? Right, July and August is going to be the months of technology delivery. Hopefully a few announcements around the pilots that we're running. Hopefully the announcement around the governance framework, and the blockchain initiative piece will nail down those negotiations in the next couple of weeks. So July and August, while August is normally quiet in the ad industry, we expect it to be pretty busy. We are going to be busy. We're not going to stop. We're pretty relentless when it comes to this. So we've just hired a new PR agency in the US. I know I have an interview with Business Insider next week. There are a number of different pieces of PR that will come out that will be talking about our project. So we'll share those with the community, and you'll see a lot of hopefully you'll see a lot of buzz around Papyrus and the project, and it'll be positive. So question number 16. The question: what is the role of your tokens in Papyrus outside of being an investing tool? So tokens are essentially, in our ecosystem, are used to pay blockchain network fees, maintain the governance for the network. And they're also for the usage of the network by advertisers to essentially extract their excessive media buying costs. So obviously there's currency fluctuations and all of that. So the Papyrus token will simplify a lot of those things. But fundamentally, the token is there to maintain the governance and for the network fees. Also, the token will enable the privacy and the transfer of information from one place to the other. So hopefully that kind of helps on that piece. So on the piece of the token economy. So the token economy is, so this is always an area that when we're pitching and people mention other projects, we ask them about the token economy. What sort of token economy have they said? And they sort of look at us blankly and go, "What are you talking about?" So a lot of the other projects, which are just white papers, haven't really given much thought to the token economy. We've spent a lot of time on this. But essentially, the economy has been designed in a way to achieve a network effect. And effectively, demand for tokens will be driven to reduce media buying costs and also increase network usage. Effectively, third-party developments on top of the platform will essentially increase the value of the Papyrus network. So if we have, and we are in the process, as I said, I've had a number of conversations with other businesses that are looking at building on top of existing protocols, and they're exploring whether they could work with us and build on top of us, and that will have a very positive effect on the token and the appreciation of the token. So hopefully I've answered that question. How often do you conduct such direct conversations with people? Look, we're gonna do this more often. As I said, I've been in place 4 months. I want to do this ideally once a month, or as often as the community wants to talk to us. Really, I mean, ideally once a month, because then we can update you and give you regular updates on where we're at, and hopefully, keep you in the picture and make you feel, part of the team, if you like. Because ultimately, we recognise that you've invested in us and you've invested in the team. So we want you to feel like you're part of the team. So we'll be doing this more regularly. So keep your questions coming in. I'm available, and my email, I'm sure, can be made available or we can create an email where you can email in questions if you've got questions at any time outside of an AMA, and we can answer them for you, no problem at all. Right, question number 20. Like the privacy and transparency and the other cool things, but does... Okay, so effectively, all these things, in terms of costs, right? So costs, the way that our costs are going to basically be, in terms of fees for transactions, they will be essentially become part of the ecosystem, much like an ad serving cost is today. So if you want to serve an ad, you're paying 0.001p cent to Google for every ad that serves across your website if you're a publisher. We expect our network costs will be effectively, won't necessarily be as low as that, but they will effectively become part of the ecosystem and part of the economy, and that will they will essentially justify the infrastructure costs, and also be provide agencies and brands, because the solution is going to provide agencies and brands with the transparency, that those costs will essentially just be rolled into the cost of doing business. So I don't think it's going to be an issue going forward. I think they're very keen for this solution, and they're very keen for blockchain. So I think it's just going to become a cost of doing business and being rolled into, and it will be rolled into their existing cost base. 21. So you put much efforts into funds and into business development. Okay, so we have put a lot of funds into business development and into building out our networks in the investor community. This will start to benefit you in Token Sale Round 2. Our upcoming partnerships, it will also provide you as a contributor and as an investor. It will provide you, as over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, as the business grows and scales, you will start to see the benefit of that. So Token Sale Round 2 is when you will see the benefit specifically. When's that going to be? I suspect it will be towards the end of the year or early next year. As I said, we're partly dictated to by the market, partly dictated to by some of the initiatives that we're working on right now. I want to make sure it's the right time. I don't want to just go to an ICO, as I said before, and have it not perform the way I want it to perform. So that's it. What's the latest milestone in your project? So Papyrus Insights Dashboard, alpha release, which will be probably, I would say, in beta, or alpha release will probably be August. And then probably 4 weeks from now, and then looking at the full release in September. That's on the technology side. On the business side, it's the negotiations and getting the partnership agreed with the associations, and that's the next milestone. That's a key milestone in my eyes right now, which is where I'm focused, and that will be hopefully in the next month or so as well. So in a month's time, hopefully I can sit here and I can answer some questions and give you demonstrate the progress that we've made in the last 4 weeks. So that's where we're going. 2023, I think I've already answered this in terms of MVP launch. So are the tests successful? So the internal tests have gone very well. The external tests, we're in the process of scoping those out. In 4 weeks' time, we'll be able to tell you a lot more about those external tests. And hopefully you'll have, and I'm assuming, given the way the system's performing right now, we expect them to be very positive. And then in terms of the improvements and the scalable piece to the system, all of that is currently ongoing, and we expect the optimal product to be launched in Q4. That's the challenge that I've set Igor and the dev team. Are we going to have streams with the tech team? Yes, we can have yes, in time, absolutely have a stream with the CTO, with Igor. It's no problem, and Dimitri. So we can set those up, no problem at all. What's the minimum price expected during launch on the exchange? That's an interesting question. I'd love to give you the answer to that, but I can't comment on that from a legal and compliance perspective. But I wish I could, but hopefully that answers all those questions. So hopefully that covers everything. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen and be part of this. And thank you very much for the questions that you sent through. Hopefully I've given you a picture as to where we're going, the vision, the progress that we've made towards that vision. And hopefully you feel comfortable now with the state of play. Please feel free to, as I said, we'll set up an email, which I will speak to Elena about, and we'll set up an email where you can send in questions if you've got any further questions to this AMA, and we can answer those for you directly, either via email or on a call separately. So just as I said, we want you to be part of our community. Feel like you're part of the team. We want you to be inquisitive and to drive us as much as possible as investors. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening, and speak to you soon. Thank you very much.